Welcome to Whole Lot of Wolves, episode 26 of season 4. We're your hosts. I'm Joshua Buckley.
I'm Paul LePage.
Joining us from New York City, our producer, Alex Patakis.
Hey, guys.
And on socials in Baltimore, Mr. Danny Paletti.
Afternoon, gents.
All right, so we're recording on a Sunday, which usually means we have a special guest, and that's the case this week. It's a voice you may recognize, especially if you turned into the Black Country Derby on ESPN Plus at the end of last month. He's a commentator for the likes of the BBC Match of the Day, talkSPORT, and TNT Sports. It's James Fielden. Welcome, James.
Hi, guys. Great pleasure. Really well, thank you. I've just done the Aston Villa Man United game tonight, so voice is struggling a bit after 90 minutes on the radio. So, hopefully we get through it okay.
No, well, thank you for carving out some time in your schedule. We really appreciate it. So kind of tell us a little bit about your journey becoming a sports commentator. And was it one of those deals where you knew for a long time that, hey, this is what I want to do?
So growing up as a Wolves fan just outside Wolverhampton, there was a radio station at the time that you may or may not know called 107.7 The Wolf, which at the time had the rights to the radio commentaries. And there were two guys who used to commentate on there, Bill Hatton and Pete Moody. Sadly, neither of them are involved in broadcasting anymore, but Bill Hatton in particular was just like an iconic commentator at the time. It was when, Wolves got promoted to the Premier League for the first time in 2003. And me and my mate at the time, obviously technology was very different. We literally, you were playing Huddersfield away on a Tuesday night and we'd be sat there camped around a radio, probably playing FIFA or something at the same time on the PlayStation and listening to it. And Rob was my best mate. And we used to sit there and say, this will be us one day. We'd love to do this. Not thinking there'd be any natural way to actually do it. And as I'll kind of mention in a minute, there isn't, because there's no direct career path. But so I jokingly said when I was a kid that I'd like to do it, but never thought I'd be in this position, to be honest. And then went to university in Stoke. They did a sports journalism course there, came out of that. Didn't actually do any specific commentary work, but kind of got the basis of journalism and sports journalism from it. And then one thing led to another. I applied for a job at a company called Perform, which was kind of the forerunner to DAZN as it is now. And I applied for this job doing a video editing position, and I didn't get a reply to the job application. And a lad started following me on Twitter a week or so after I applied. And in his bio, it said that he worked at Perform. And so I sent him a DM and was like, oh, hi, mate. Really sorry to bug you. I've applied for this job. Didn't hear anything back. Can you help out? And he said, yeah, look, leave it with me. I'll get back to you. He comes back to me about 8 or 9 days later. And he's like, mate, I'm really sorry that job's gone. How do you fancy doing commentary instead? And I was like, wow, I mean, I'd love to do that, but I've got absolutely no experience. I'll be honest about it. I wouldn't even know where to start with it, to be honest. And he's like, don't worry, we'll bring you down for a training day. It'll all be fine. Down I go. They give us half an hour to prep a game between St Johnstone and Aberdeen, I think it was, in the SPL as it would have been then. And I did this full day of training. And at the end of it, they said, we can't give you one of the jobs. We like what you're saying, but not the way you say it. And basically, they said my accent was too strong. I don't know how it kind of comes across to you guys now, but at the time, I was a lot more broad, kind of Black Country, at least West Midlands, even though I kind of grew up just outside the main area. But they basically said, go away for the summer, change your voice, and come back.
As somebody with a Southern accent, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, yeah. Because they used to say, I don't know whether people would agree with this, but the reason they gave to me was that you end sentences on a high note. So I might have said at the time, I had a great time on the Whole Lot of Wolves podcast tonight. And to them, it sounded like I hadn't finished my sentences. So they basically told me to go away. They basically told me to go away for the summer, change it, and come back. And so I sat in front of a TV with a dictaphone in front of me, just to kind of resemble a microphone in some way, and just practiced. And eventually, they let me at it in the summer, and then was commentating on all manner of things. I was doing CONCACAF Champions League games. I did like Montreal Impact's run to the final, I think they got to at that time. Chinese, Japanese, all the South American leagues, everything basically that didn't have a TV rights deal in the UK. at all times of the day and night, getting up at 6 a.m. for a Chinese game and then going back at 3 a.m. the next morning for a Mexican game or something. It was an amazing grounding, and you could make mistakes and get away with it because the games were being broadcast on the bookmakers' websites. So I was really lucky that I had that grounding, because a lot of people start in radio and then move over to TV, whereas I did it in reverse. And I think it's actually helped me in the long run, because now when I do radio, I have to kind of up my game in terms of saying more, whereas a lot of people who've done radio and then gone into TV actually have to stop themselves from describing so much. So I think I've been lucky in that way. But anyway, so I started there, and then one thing led to another, and have kind of gone on to different things since then. So the West Midlands is home, but I live in South London now. I'm actually not too far away from Selhurst Park, so it'll be pretty lively around here tomorrow when they take on Chelsea.
What's it like behind the scenes then, James, when you prepare for games and broadcasts? What does that work out during the week in terms of training?
I mean, every single day and every single week is different, to be honest, depending on what the kind of schedule is that I've got. As it was actually last week, we were away on holiday in Norway for a few days, and I got back late on Thursday and then had the game I did yesterday at Wolves, did Villa today, and I'm doing Crystal Palace Chelsea tomorrow. That if you're listening in the US, you'd be able to hear on Sirius, for example, because the commentary's carried over there. But I mean, I kind of almost like reset on a Monday generally. I mean, I'm doing a Monday game tomorrow, but on any normal week, I'd kind of look at what I've got and then say, right, okay, I'm going to have to do work for this game on this day. Okay, I'm going out for dinner on Tuesday, which might end up writing off Wednesday morning, depending on what happens at dinner. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of looking at all the different dynamics and things like that. But I basically have a number of folders on my laptop that have mini bios for each team, so that if I revisit a team at any point during the season, I've already got their squad list typed out. I've already got kind of the essence of what they're about, their little recent history, little bio on the manager, what they did last season, all of this kind of thing. So I mean, I do so many different leagues and competitions, it's really hard to keep up. So it's a case of kind of sifting through all the various things. We have loads of different logins for different stats websites, and places where we can get, resources from. And then if you excuse me for a minute, I'll show you what I produce. I appreciate this won't come across well on a podcast to people listening, but
we can describe it.
I can describe, yeah. So this, for example, is what I had yesterday at Molineux. So I don't know how well you can kind of see it, but basically I split my page in two and kind of have like the team at the top and the manager, a bit on the kind of recent results, and then all the kind of player stuff in here.
Okay. And it's all color coded. It looks like.
I mean, my handwriting is nowhere near good enough, so I have to rely on the laptop, or whatever, and then kind of have the teams written out in formation and subs and yellow cards or whatever. At the bottom.
In the US, we call those Waffle House menus.
Oh, really? Okay. Very interesting. Never heard that. And then kind of have a bit on both the teams as well in terms of stats and that kind of thing.
That's great.
Sky Sports, who are the main rights holder here for Premier League, produce stat packs for every single game. They're kind of 30 or 40 pages long, have all the stats you could ever want to find about an individual team, about the game coming up, head-to-head stuff, and then each player probably has about 10 or 15 bullet points. Like for example, the United one earlier kind of had Rasmus Højlund, he scored in each of his last 4 games, having not scored in his first 14, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Anything, maybe yesterday I had a bit about Nathan Collins, because obviously he played at Wolves for a season, gifted Wolves 2 goals in the reverse fixture in December.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So it's kind of just a backup, really, just to make sure you've kind of covered all bases. Or maybe a kid gets named in the squad for Brentford, for example, who I'm not as familiar with, who maybe I don't know anything about, and it'll have a bit about them in there. So, if suddenly it's sprung on you 75 minutes from kickoff that a lad out of their B team is going to be on the bench, you've got something to quickly look at and refer to. And as I'll speak about in a while, I had to kind of do the pre-match interviews with both managers yesterday as well. So it's really quite a tight turnaround. But to kind of answer the question in full, no week is the same, but I have to basically get everything done the night before a game, because I tend to get to a match 3 hours before. So a lot of that tends to be social time, and you can't guarantee that you're going to get any work done then, because you're seeing a lot of colleagues and friends and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of preparation. It's a lot of laptop time. I actually, interestingly, like to work a lot at night. I mean, I guess I'm home based, but I work a lot into the kind of early hours, especially if you've done a night game, for example, like tomorrow. Game starts at 8 o'clock UK time. We'll finish at 10. I won't be home until after 11. I'm not going to be able to go to bed straight away because my mind will still be working quite hard. So I tend to sit up and just do a little bit of work. And yeah, I rarely have an actual full day off. I always tend to do a little bit each day. But yeah, you're always kind of looking ahead and seeing what you can do. And especially in the international breaks when it's maybe a little bit quieter, you can kind of look ahead and say, okay, I've got Ferencvaros against Olympiacos in a couple of weeks. What can I kind of do now? What research can I do now that's not going to go out of date in that time, if that makes sense? So yeah, you kind of leave the actual player stuff and the match stuff until they've played their previous game, if that makes sense. So Chelsea played Villa in the FA Cup replay on Tuesday, I think it was. So I couldn't start anything on that game until they played that match. So you're always kind of looking at the previous match that they're playing and working out when you can fit it in. But yeah, it's quite hectic and a bit all over the place, which doesn't really work for a social life. But that's one of the consequences, I guess.
So what does it actually look like on a match day after all that prep, James?
Yeah, so I mean, I like to get to a stadium like 3 hours before, generally. I mean, I travel on trains everywhere around England because it's just a lot more convenient, and especially at a ground like Molineux that's in the city centre, it's a lot easier. Sorry. So yeah, I tend to arrive at the stadium 3 hours before, and then this gives you ample time for everything. Yesterday, I had the responsibility of managing. Yesterday, I had the responsibility of interviewing both managers before the game as well. So it was a case of going down to the tunnel. You have to do 2 players when they arrive at the stadium. So they literally get off the bus and come straight into the interview area. So yesterday we did Pablo Sarabia and Sergio Reguilon for Brentford. So you have to kind of keep the questions specific about the game. And then basically they're kind of pushed out abroad and everywhere. Everyone's got the rights to it, so they can use those interviews if they want to preview the game. Obviously, it's in English, so if the game's being shown in Spain or Portugal, it might not be much use for them, but they're there anyway. And then the teams for the media get announced 75 minutes before. We all have access to a little portal that basically gives you the lineups that are embargoed for 15 minutes. So that's quite useful, especially if you're doing radio, for example. You've got that 15 minutes to sift through the teams. You can work out who's playing, who's not playing. Why is X or Y not playing? As Hwang, Gary O'Neill did his press conference on Friday and basically expected Hwang was going to be in the squad. And then it turned out that while he was doing his press conference, Hwang basically reported to the medical staff that he had a slight injury. Anyway, and so then it was a surprise to us that he wasn't named in the squad. And it was, I basically stood there and got 3 questions to ask Gary O'Neill. As it was, the team was unchanged, so it didn't really change things too much, but you can ask him about, what specific threats Brentford have, and you can just get an insight on the team news, basically. So yeah, you do both teams, and then it's a case of kind of sifting through the teams, writing my sheet up as I just showed you guys with the lineups and that kind of thing, and then heading up to the gantry, and then you're kind of scripting your intro because you have to write different lengths of ones depending on whether your game ends up being an amazing game that ends 5-5 or it's 0-0 and it's bottom of the running order. So yeah, you have to do a bit of everything. And then you make your way up, and then we have a big box, a big mixer box on the desk where you've got all these different knobs. You can turn up the crowd noise, you can turn up the noise that you're making. We also get to listen to VAR, which is really interesting in real time, which obviously the fans would like and would be a massive improvement, I think. But at the moment, only the TV commentators get to hear it, so that you can kind of almost relay that information to people who are watching at home, and you can say, okay, VAR, Peter Banks, as it was yesterday, is telling the referee to delay the game because they're checking for potential handball. And especially when a goal is being checked, it's quite good because they can take you through the stages of it. They're like, right, we've cleared the potential offside. We're just checking the rest of the phase of play. And so, yeah, any moments like that you can relay and that kind of thing. And then it's a case of just doing the game, basically. But yeah, that's it. And then as soon as the game finishes, you head downstairs, and then you basically put a request into who you want to speak to. You'll do the 2 managers as standard, and then you speak to normally one of the goal scorers, generally how it works out. And so obviously with the story around Ivan Toney and everything that's happened to him over the last 6 or 8 months, and the fact that he kind of got the goal that won the game for them or sealed the game for them. We wanted to speak to him. So he was already down there doing an interview with Premier League Productions. So if you were watching the game in America or North America or wherever, that interview would have been made available straight away. And then Tony went back into the dressing room and then came back out again 5 or 10 minutes later to do the interview with me. So everyone involved with the game really gets put through their paces. Managers are doing 6 or 7 interviews on like a busy day if they're playing one of the big hitters, and maybe they've got Malaysian TV there, they've got beIN Sports out of Doha, they've got Norwegian TV, they've got ESPN, from all different places around the globe. So yeah, and then that's it basically. So once you kind of got free time until 2:00, and then once the teams drop, then you're kind of away with it really. And that hour before the game is your chance to kind of scribble and craft what you're going to say in the game. So it's a long day, and then you end up walking away from the game, inevitably cursing yourself, saying, "Oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, maybe I should have left that out. I can't believe I didn't mention this. How did I forget about this time they played each other?" That kind of thing. But yeah, you beat yourself up after every game, basically. So that's the way it is. But I wouldn't swap it for anything. I absolutely love it, and I'm very privileged. I know that.
So when I was in the sports media in the US, the big thing they always said was there's no cheering in the press box. But judging from, the Twitter back and forth with the journalists and a lot of the emotion that's seen, it seems like it's a different atmosphere in UK press boxes. And it really seems like the Wolves press that you guys really have a camaraderie about it.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Wolves are a big club in their own right, and relatively speaking, but compared to like the big 6 or 6.5, as it's kind of now called, with Newcastle kind of entering, like the amount of people that cover Wolves is actually quite small. Like Gary O'Neill's press conference on a Friday is attended by BBC WM, 2 journalists from the Express and Star, would have been 1 from the Birmingham Mail, which don't really cover Wolves so much now. And then maybe someone from a newspaper agency, maybe one of the 2 of the nationals like the Sun or Daily Mail might send their own individual guy. But compare that to a Manchester United press conference on a Friday, and I imagine it's probably 3 times the size, to be honest. So my point being is that everyone knows each other. It's the same people who are turning up at each game. Some of them probably share lifts to some games, depending on where they live. So, I mean, everyone gets on really well, and ultimately everyone's there to help each other out. Information gets passed around. It's kind of the way it works. But although there are rivalries in terms of, radio stations or newspapers are all fighting for the same audience, like everyone's friends, everyone gets along. We're all very lucky to have these jobs, and there's plenty of work to go around. So everyone gets on, and hopefully it stays that way because it just helps everyone, and it's a good atmosphere. And I should say that's the same with the people who work for the club as well. Like Max and Jack, who are in charge of the media at Wolves, have a really good relationship with everyone who works with them and help them out and everything like that. So it's quite very harmonious in that sense, I'd say.
So on to the current playing side, James. Let's go back to the start of the season, the turmoil with Lopetegui, O'Neill coming in. Were in those professional circles Wolves generally seen as that relegation threat, or do you think it was a little lazy journalism, the bookmakers putting odds in there based on what they'd seen and not really knowing what the circumstances were like behind the scenes?
I don't think it was totally unfair to suggest that they were going to be struggling against relegation, especially with the players that left. And, at the time when Lopetegui obviously left in the week before the United game, there wasn't really a lot coming the other way. I can't even remember if they'd signed anyone at that point, possibly even not. I don't think it was. Okay, there we go. I don't think it was a ridiculous thing to say, but as ever, these things don't always work out. I mean, I remember doing one of Luton's first games this season, and I was working with a co-commentator that day, and they were saying, "Are Luton even going to win a point?" I mean, and look at them now; they're kind of one of the stories of the season. And at the moment, Rob Edwards has surely got to be the big contender for manager of the season. Like, you just don't know how things are going to pan out, who underachieves, who overachieves. I mean, I suppose the one thing from my point of view is that I'm not involved in Wolves every single week, so I can't speak for the other guys who do. I kind of dip in and out like I do with most teams. But Yeah, I mean, especially Gary O'Neill was certainly a relative unknown. He didn't have a pre-season. People had only seen what he'd done with Bournemouth last season in a relatively similar situation. So yeah, I don't think it was totally unfair. But O'Neill appearing on Sky and talking through his tactics and the way he goes about things obviously opened him up to a wider audience and gained himself a massive amount of respect. I don't know how intentional that was or whether he'd have done it anyway. But yeah, Thomas Frank was the same, actually, the Brentford manager who'd done it a few weeks previous, who I'm a big fan of. So yeah, I mean, what they've done this season, I think, considering the recruitment they've had or not had, as the case might have been in January, is pretty good, really. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was particularly unfair of anyone to give them that kind of tag. But yeah, as I say, you never quite know how things are going to pan out, especially in English football. So there you go.
So what do you think the ceiling is for Gary O'Neill and the team this season? And do we need to be worried about O'Neill leaving soon as well?
I'd like to think that the fact that Wolves gave him an opportunity, as I say, it's you could argue a top half club in terms of fan base and everything else that goes with it. I'd like to think that he would repay that faith, and I think he probably wants a pre-season as well, because he hasn't had one in management yet. Certainly not senior management, because he's had a couple of youth roles and bits and pieces. But I also said that about Michael Beale at QPR when Wolves were in for him before, and was saying to myself and to colleagues, like, surely he owes it to them. They've literally given him his chance in football, like a solid second division club. Like, I think it was more than fair for him to stay. And then obviously, was talking about loyalty and everything when the Wolves job came and went, and then obviously left shortly afterwards to go back up to the Rangers. So yeah, you can rule nothing out, but I would like to think that he'd have a good crack at another season.
And we've covered it already, James, but just from a professional standpoint, what was your take on yesterday's game from the press box?
I don't think anyone can have massive complaints, really. I was actually up on the TV gantry yesterday, so hanging from the ceiling almost at Molineux, which is an amazing view. And, most fans would never get to watch a game from there because of the kind of access that people do or don't get on a match day. But you're almost right on top of it. You've got the best bird's eye view of anyone in the stadium. It must be one of the best in the Premier League. I haven't commentated at all of them at all, but I struggle to think how it can be much better than that, because you have the perfect viewpoint. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously losing Matheus Cunha quite early on was a massive setback for them. But there were points in the first half where they just kept chucking the ball long, and against the front line of, what was it, Neto, I can't even think who played yesterday now. Neto and Cunha at the time, Bellegarde, who came on, and Sarabia, right. There's not much height there. I mean, they must be 5'10" max. I mean, that's the same height I am, and I wouldn't fancy my chances against Collins, Pinnock, and me, all of the massive battlers of defenders. I just thought we played into their hands quite a lot, and it's one of those games, or it turned out to be one of those games, where you just got to really move the ball quickly, and Wolves just didn't do that in the first half. And how often have you seen a team knock on the door so many times, have that goal ruled out correctly for offside, whether people think that's right or not in terms of what it should be? It was the correct decision. And yeah, just didn't. They were snatching at things. They were getting a bit too frantic. They just looked desperate to score and just couldn't. And you see the breakaway goal, and Ivan Toney's there. He barely had a kick all game, but he's a man who can finish in those kind of situations, and he's just so cool. Spoke to him afterwards, actually, in a clip that went pretty viral when we were talking about his future. But yeah, I don't think anyone can have any complaints, and I just think I think it was probably a bit of a setback for them, to be honest. I think I said in my intro on the BBC yesterday that Wolves are kind of starting to dream of Europe again, but I think that's the kind of game you really need to put away in some respect if you're going to finish top 7 or top 8, as it may end up being. So yeah, I don't think they can have any complaints, but it'd be interesting to see how they react against Spurs next week.
Thanks, James. We really appreciate you taking the time today, thanks. Especially after calling a game today.
No problems at all.
Whole Lot of Wolves is looking to expand its squad, so if you enjoy working in the creative capacity and share a passion for Wolves and graphic design, you could be the perfect addition to our growing crew. If you're interested in learning more, drop us a note via email at hello@wholelotofwolves.com or reach us on X at WLW Pod.
Thanks to James Fielden for taking some time out of his Sunday to talk with us. Guys, let's jump right into it. Wolves 2-0 loss against Brentford. Tough one, Paul. Kind of maybe knew something was going to be up when Hwang wasn't in the starting lineup.
Just in the squad itself, that again, we were excited about the possibility all the week, talking the week that he was back, and it was nice to be thinking that we've got that that full squad to pick from, and then to hear that he wasn't involved entirely, that was a little bit of a blow. Again, you're just looking at the bench and wanting those options to turn to. But as a starting 11, I think I was relatively content that if you're going to turn out a performance against Chelsea like that, then those same guys certainly need to be starting the next game and going unchanged.
Danny, it seemed like a little bit of a shaky start. Even the commentators were talking about how Brentford was really taking it to them early. Do you think we're a little flat on the pitch and in the stands?
Yeah, it feels like in part, a continuing trend where we have, I wouldn't say that we start poorly per se, but we start ceding a lot of the initiative to the other team, which sometimes suits us. We sort of soak up some pressure and then attack on the break. But the difference felt like we weren't nearly as incisive. Even before Brentford had scored, I feel like we spent a lot of time when we were in possession, camped out sort of just on the edges of their box. And it just never looked like we were going to get a quick pass or run in. So there were worrying signs early on, even though I thought we handled the pressure they did give us reasonably well.
And of course, the big blow was Matheus Cunha coming out in the 20th minute with a hamstring injury. That really changed the game. He was replaced by Bellegarde in a false nine. But Alex, that was a little disappointing, and we have a no stupid question about this, right?
Yeah, we do. Steve Young writes in and asks first what the injury status is for Cunha, and then also he has some self-reflection and says he could have been the cause since a personalized Cunha number 12 jersey was recently purchased at 50% off. A lot of finger pointing here about cursing Wolves, including in our own group chat as well. But for Steve's question, unless I'm wrong, I don't think there has been any true status update for Matheus Cunha. We know it's a hamstring, and we know we don't like hamstrings. But was it his fault? I think we let Steve off on that one, right?
Yeah, we'll let him off.
I think we would have found out by now. I think it would have broken today if it had been for a scan, and if it was serious, that would have got out. But again, let's avoid any jinxes that we'll say this today and then put the show out tomorrow, and then there'll be breaking news in the morning from like John Percy or something who's out for 6 weeks or something. So
yeah,
let's cross everything that needs crossing. Yeah,
don't even say a 6 to 8 weeks. That'd be rough. Yeah. And guys, it definitely took a lot of steam out of Wolves, you could tell. And then Brentford was finally able to take advantage, scoring in the 35th minute. Honestly, it looked like it was going to happen before then, Paul.
It did. It seemed like they were having the better chances, but it just comes down to the fact again that it was our mistake, and both Sarr and Dawson were fallible with that particular goal. But it comes down to the goalkeeper for me. If that ball's dropping in your 6-yard box, you're clearing everyone out to get something on it, not lying back and just not being present. So it kind of had that a little inevitability about it. And again, what's that now? The third week running where we've gone from that best defense that hasn't conceded from a set piece now for 3 weeks. It's opened up again. So I don't think they're going to be well. They can't. They'd want to be guarding against that every time. I don't think they're going to be setting themselves up to say we're not going to concede a goal from a set piece. But it is frustrating that you did think they had that solidity to them, and now every time there's a set piece, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, Danny, and who do you think the blame was more? Was it Saw? Was it Dawson?
I saw both getting, similar treatment online, and it was clearly, whenever you see a free header so close to the goal like that, it's never gonna be just, hold your hands up and say that Brentford are good on set pieces kind of thing. Um, I've seen some people suggest that Saw claimed gave a shout, and having watched it back, I have to say that the evidence is certainly on that side. And if he's going to give a shout, then he's got to come and get it. Um, I think, could Dawson have been tighter? Could he have gotten himself in the way of Norgard, knowing that Jose Saw was coming up over him? Because you see the still images, and Dawson is leaning over like he's expecting Jose Saw to leap over him and claim that ball. Could he have done more? Probably. But I think it's just another one where Jose Saw maybe is showing that he's a bit erratic.
There's always a couple of those, it feels like.
Yeah.
So down 1-0, the big halftime change was Nathan Frazier coming on in for Toti Gomez. Wolves went with 4 in the back with Frazier up top. Alex, what do you think? Agree with that decision, or maybe panicked a little too early?
I think I agree with it from the standpoint that I like Gary O'Neill's aggression in the terms of we may as well go for it, losing 1-0 versus losing 2-0 or 3-0. Like, who really cares? This is a game we're at home. We should be acting like it's one we're supposed to win, especially given Brentford's recent form. That being said, not having all the options you would want them to have if they were at full strength definitely hampers that, right? So I feel like the intent was correct from Gary O'Neill, but we did kind of get a nice reminder that Nathan Frazier is a very young player who's probably not, Premier League ready yet. And, I was saying I want to see him play more, yes, in EPL games, but not losing 1-0 to Brentford and because of injury, right? That's not the situation we wanted to see him in. So, that being said, I think Brentford, it felt like they had made the decision that they were going to sit back and let Wolves trying to break them down. I mean, we ended the game with 70% possession. So whatever you want to say about the second goal, fine. But I don't think that moving to a back four is what broke Wolves in this game. They've looked shakier in other games, I think, with a back four before we kind of stumbled upon this formation we've stuck with. So I was fine with it.
50th minute, Paul. It looked like Dawson had scored on our own little set piece. Ruled offsides, though, by the letter of the law. Yes, that was the correct decision. I don't know. I don't think you can argue with it, but how do you feel about that, Paul?
I think you can argue continually with those types of decisions when it comes down to these lines and length of lines and all sorts. If you're going off that decision yesterday, then Dawson was offside because he's got bigger feet. So if you're able to have scientific evidence that the line starts on the heel, then fair enough if he's offside, but you can't be doing these microscopic centimeters of offside decisions when it's not even to anyone's advantage like that. That's where it breaks down for me. Where it works well is that clarity of decision when it's a scientific fact that it's a ball over the line, that it's a goal. And until they've got offside as a scientific fact that it is offside, not down to lines, not down to any interpretations like that, then it's pointless in my eyes. And I think it's been said before, it takes a lot to score in the Premier League. And we, at that stage of the game, we'd come out the second half the brighter, we're having the better opportunities, we're having the share of the game. I generally think if that goal had gone in, we'd have gone on and won. And then it suckers it out you got to restart again. So I don't know, it's kind of getting sick just treading over old ground all the time with this, but it's not good any day when you're trying to promote a sport that encourages goals and then you're taking them away for a length of a toe. It makes no sense to me.
It's just going to be tough, I think, to change it, because then we're asking the officials to make more of judgment calls, which they've proven not to be able to do. So just kind of sucks all in all. Then Ivan Toney put it away. Danny in the 77th minute, playing from the back, came back to cost Wolves in that one. Jose Sa, not that great playing from behind the back, and maybe that's something we've kind of overlooked for a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of debates about whether it's, I mean, we know friend of the show, Stu, has his own axes to grind about this. And it's funny, I think that they're actually live right now. So he might be doing it as we speak. But, it's a question of, I know that it's kind of trendy for every team to a certain extent to play out of the back. And there are plenty of very smart people who tell you why it's useful, even if your team is not Man City. But undeniably, I think, Craig Dawson had a bit of a day to forget, to be honest. And it wasn't that he was terrible. I thought that he was mostly what we expect out of him for 80% of the match, but that other 20% ended up costing us, especially in that second goal, because that was a bad giveaway. Just to put that pass just beyond Tommy Doyle, who had to make a choice whether to dive in and try to stop the counterattack, which he didn't do. Who knows how that would have gone. But it immediately put us like on I think like a 3-on-2 or something. And it was just, there wasn't really a way that we were going to get out of that at that point.
So overall thoughts on the performance? Is this just one you crack up to? Bad day at the office? Maybe some concerns that may follow this, Paul, not counting Cunha's injury, of course, which is the big thing.
Well, it's all very Wolvesy, and by that it was the mid-table Wolves that always churns out this type of performance after the Lord's Mayor show against Chelsea, then that type of opponent in Brentford that comes to Molineux the week after. We've seen it season after season, so I'm not beating myself too much over it today. I think there's some positives you could potentially take from it, that the positivity in going to 4 at the back and changing that shape and giving the trust in that back 4 that they could handle 2 tricky attackers in terms of Tony and Morpay. I think that's a positive. I think, unfortunately, the Cunha loss meant that more pressure was put on Neto, and they cottoned onto that and stuck at least 2 or 3 guys on him when he got the ball. So that took that attacking threat out. So again, if you are down to the bare bones, you're juggling those types of hindrances, then it would have been a long day. And it was definitely one of those games where it didn't matter who was playing, they could have played into the night and we still wouldn't have scored. So,
Danny?
Yeah, I had a couple takeaways, and one positive and one less so. The positive thing is that, as you know, I spend too much time online, and there was a lot of negativity, as you'd imagine, after any loss.
Bad.
But it's funny, we put together a series of decent results, going back honestly from the Christmas match until now, and there gets to be this belief, which is really intoxicating, and it's really fun to be on a run where you're getting so many points, you're progressing in the cup. But we're a mid-table team. We're going to be inconsistent, and part of being inconsistent is losing frustrating games against teams that are out of form. So it's not like entirely surprising that we would end up losing to Brentford, even at home. But these things are bound to happen. Now, the slightly negative take on this game that I had is that, and I'm certainly not the first to say this, but it really shows how important Cunha is to the way that we've come into that good form over the last couple months. I saw people complaining about us bringing on Bellegarde instead of Fraser when he went off. And obviously, in terms of Fraser, there's a number of reasons why you might want to wait and give him fewer minutes. But in terms of the choice to bring Bellegarde on, I think it's obvious that the reason that he does that is because he's worried. Gary O'Neill's more worried about us missing that ability to receive the ball with back to goal, lay it off, and then build up real quickly. Because that's what Bellegarde does, is he can carry the ball through the midfield. And that's not something that Fraser does. He's not as worried about someone sticking the ball in the back of the net, because he knows that Neto can do it. other players can do it. Lamina has done it, you know. And I think that that's the concern going forward, especially if Cunha is out for a while, is like, how do we continue to build that up? Because with Wayne coming back, I think we will have players who can shoot and score, but are we going to be able to play the way that Gary O'Neill wants us to if Cunha is out for a while? That's the part that worries me over that performance.
Well, and also to say we had a quiet January window and that's why we lost. No, come on, guys.
Right.
Come on. Bringing in a number 9 on January 31st, 11 days ago was not going to give Wolves a win there. So
we just had arguably our best 6 weeks with Ryan Aitnori and Hwang actually out of the country.
Yeah.
And Neto partially injured for part of it,
Well.
Oh, well. On to the next one, right, guys?
The best way to support Whole Lot of Wolves is by supporting our sponsors, like Esfuerzo Wines. But if you're interested in making a contribution directly to the show, you can do so via Spotify or by visiting buymeacoffee.com/WLWpod. That's buymeacoffee.com/WLWpod. Up the Wolves.
Wolves are back at it on Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, against Spurs again. And back previewing the game with us from the Tottenham Depot podcast is Andrew. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going good, gentlemen. How are we on this this fine Sunday?
Well, I'll be better if Chiefs money line hits.
I've stayed away from the side. I'm on the under, but that's about it.
Solid choice. So on the game Saturday against Brighton, you guys got a stoppage time winner. How does that result in performance kind of align with your recent form?
Well, when it comes to recent form for Spurs, honestly, there's kind of been no such thing. If you guys remember back to the reverse fixture between our two teams, it came right after what we call the Chelsea game. Now everybody just in Spurs world refers to it as the Chelsea game. It was the game where both starting center back Mickey van de Ven and midfielder James Maddison were injured and lost for a pretty lengthy time. And there were also 2 red cards suffered in that game. So Spurs went through, suspension wilderness as well as injury wilderness there for the last few months. So the form has been kind of all over the place, but this Brighton match was kind of symbolic of what a lot of Spurs matches have been over the last few months, because there's been so much disruption within the team, not only due to those suspensions and injuries, but there were also multiple players that departed for both AFCON and the Asian Cup. We lost basically three starters to international duty in the middle of the season, which is pretty uncommon, but it's just something that this team's been going through, like many other Premier League teams have been going through as well. But the form has really been Spurs just play crazy games. And in fact, one of my favorite stats that I read over the last few days is that Tottenham are the only side to have both won 15 or more points from a losing position and lost 15 or more points from a winning position in the Premier League this season. That's pretty much how we roll. That's what Ange Ball has become in these last handful of months. And obviously, perfect example of that is the reverse fixture, where we led after an early goal, tried to hang on, and gave up 2 in stoppage time to lose it. That was just kind of the start of a nightmare 4 or 5 game stretch for us following that Chelsea match. We did find our footing a little bit kind of through November and into December a little bit, really handled the festive fixtures pretty well. But lately it's been up and down. There's been draws mixed in with a few lucky and late wins. And I say lucky only in the sense that we've been battling so much of this adversity in terms of getting all of these players back. But luckily for the first time, and maybe it's a little bit serendipitous that it comes against Wolves, this is probably going to be the first match where we are almost at a full strength since prior to that Chelsea match. So we finally have the bodies back in camp. Not only Heung-min Son from the Asian Cup, but midfielders Pat Matisar and Yves Bissouma are back from the African Cup. James Maddison is back playing, maybe not quite to his prior form, but is getting his feet under him, has played the last handful of matches since his injury. And Mickey van de Ven, same deal. The back line for Spurs has pretty much been, back to being solidified with both Romero and Van de Ven as the center backs in the middle there. So it's been good now that we kind of have all of the bodies back, and we're hoping to kick on and hold on to this top 4 place that we actually have now after this week and after this really big victory over Brighton.
So home team again this week, Andrew. Is there a particular plan for the opponent under Ange Ball, or is it up to the visitors who should be worrying about you?
Well, it truly doesn't matter if we are home, away. We could be playing on Mars, and we're going to be going after it. I mean, that's just the way that we do it under Ange Postecoglou. He's finally, a little more than half a season into this project, has his players buying into a system where they're going to go after it. Now, there's going to be the occasional game where that looks pretty ugly. Spurs played a match a few weeks ago in the FA Cup where they ended up going out to Manchester City, and granted, it's Manchester City. You've got to approach things a little bit differently. Probably the best team in the world on any given day, but Spurs did not look like they were going after it and getting down the pitch like they wanted to be. Any other time, they're going after it. They're leaving themselves exposed a little bit at the back at times in doing so, but they would rather win a game 4-3 or 5-4 than try to play a nervy 1-0. So this is going to, I expect it to be open. It was open against Brighton. It's been open against teams like Brentford in recent weeks, even. It's always go after it, especially at home, but even on the road for this team. And in terms of the worrying, I mean, like I said, this team is finally getting back to full strength, which is nice to see. I don't really have a lot of worry. The one thing I've seen in recent weeks, and I'm actually curious if this is being seen by folks like yourselves who follow a different team more closely, but we've been seeing a lot of issues at the back on set pieces with goalkeepers not getting protected. And that's where a lot of goals have come from is, our new goalkeeper Vicario kind of getting pushed around a little bit. That's where we've been seeing a little bit of worry. But in terms of form, we've really had, like I said, guys getting back into it. Pat Matissar is one to watch in the midfield, came back from the African Cup, probably had a man of the match performance against Brighton this past weekend, scored a goal, was really brilliant just in orchestrating the midfield. And in terms of the front line, it's also nice with this team now, and after a pretty successful January window in which they brought in Timo Werner and Radu Dragusin to play center back, they have options now off the bench now that they're getting healthy as well. So it really will be about form and kind of who fits the opponent, according to Ange Postecoglou. But there are at least options all across the field now for this team as well.
And with all those options, Son is back. He came on as a sub in the victory this past weekend. So who do you expect to come out of the starting 11 from that win over Brighton?
It's a really good question because, like I said, the options in attack now, you almost have Richarlison up the middle, who's been extremely, goal worthy. I mean, the guy has scored something like 8 in 10. He's been on a really, really nice run. And a lot of that was very important because of Sonny's absence throughout the month of January over at the Asian Cup. But now that he is back, it probably does push Timo Werner to the bench, I would guess. Son likely comes back in at the left wing spot. The right wing spot more than likely belongs to Dejan Kulusevski still, but Brennan Johnson came in and scored that late winner against Brighton. And Brennan Johnson has been much maligned by a lot of Tottenham fans, but he's a young player who's kind of still getting his feet in this system. And we've seen him score a couple goals in his recent outings. So he may be pushing for a starting spot on that right side. The front has the options, which is really nice. And then the midfield has some of those, lesser than, but still important options too. So it'll be interesting to see how Postecoglou decides to put together a starting 11 for a Wolves team that, has given Spurs problems and obviously gave them problems last time out. So it'll be a hopefully for our sake, a chance at some redemption for what happened last time.
Thanks to Andrew from the Tottenham Depot Podcast for joining us again. All right, guys, let's look at the prediction table. We all sucked last week. Every one of us, 0 points.
We were so confident.
Yeah, Paul, you still got a chance, but you got to get some points here. All right. With this week, Alex, what do you have?
I am confident Wolves will score with or without Matheus Cunha. So, and a big part of that is what Andrew said. Tottenham's going to go for it. That being said, they are very, very good. They have a lot of attacking options. So 2-2.
2-2. Okay. Danny?
I have no idea what to think about this game. Like Alex, I think we have every chance to go in there and do what Wolves do and show up against a big opponent and at least put on a show, if not come away with a good result. But I am worried about their abilities, especially with Son back now. So let's just say I'll go with the best result for the international broadcasters and say it's going to be a 1-1 draw. Hwang and Son both are going to score.
Nice. Paul?
That very Wolvesy would naturally predict a Wolves win this week after losing to Brentford, but I can't keep on even thinking that this season because that luck's got to run out at some stage. So I'm going off a few pointers of what Andrew said about kind of craziness and things like that. I'm choosing goal scoring violence and going for a 3-3 draw.
Ooh.
You guys in your draws. Look, guys, we went from not being able to win in London to winning our last two, winning two this last month. I'm not sure if they can do it a third time, unfortunately. I'm going to say 2-1 Spurs, but I will be glad to lose points on that one.
No Stupid Questions is presented by Esfuerzo Wines. Located just north of Santa Barbara, California, Esfuerzo Wines showcases passion and 3 generations of winemaking in every bottle. So whether you're celebrating a Wolves victory or winding down after a day at work, let Esfuerzo Wines transport you to the heart of California's wine country with every sip. For a limited time, head to esfuerzowines.com and use the promo code WOLVES for a 15% discount on your wine purchases. This message is intended for those of legal drinking age. Do not drink and drive. Excessive alcohol consumption may be harmful to your health. If you or someone you know is struggling with alcohol abuse, please seek help. Esfuerzo Wines reminds you to enjoy their products responsibly and in moderation.
Right, Alex, it's that time.
It is time for No Stupid Questions, and frequent guest Todd DeWitt writes in with what might be a timely reminder if some of us haven't been paying attention to the calendar, asking on X whether we think Wolves players exchange Valentine's Day cards. What do you guys think about that?
So
100%
this is kind of
sawdust.
this is kind of a very more of an American theme question as well. When you come to the elementary school setting and everyone gets a card, you're like, you get a card and the kids are doing the boxes. It's really more the romance in the UK and the secret admirer. So we haven't really got that everyone gets a card. It's more kind of the secret romances and the admirers from a distance.
So does the English FA deliver a secret admirer letter to Gary O'Neill?
There you go. Yeah. It's got one of those wax stamps on the back, like with a heart and the 3 lions in it. Only he can open it. If it comes to him, and Matt Hobbs has like gone over the top of it with to have a read of it first. It could be something like that.
Which Wolves player sends Lopetegui a Valentine?
Ooh.
And why is it Ryan Eaton-Reed?
Yeah.
Good Lord. Is
I can't
Lopetegui at the
believe
London Stadium yet? Do we know?
Yeah. Oh, he's still lingering around. I can't believe that Lopetegui had no use for Aiden Nori with how good he's been. Moving on with the No Stupid Questions. Eric asks on X at WLW Pod is where you get us on X, by the way. Which of Nuno's Europa quarterfinalists would feature in Gary O'Neill's current team? I love this question. So who's getting into the current 11 from the Nuno 11 in the Europa League, let's say?
I picked up on this one from him and I answered on the thread. Originally, I went with probably the only one because of the uniqueness of the setup of the two sides being same formation but distinctly different. I'm going to tweak it a little from what I originally said. I said at the moment a fit, like 100% pre all injuries Willy Bolly comes in for Totti. And then I would probably at the moment try and bring in Diogo Jota as the number 9 if he's going to play that harrying quick press forward. I'd probably bring Jota in for for Wang. But again, this goes back to that playing out from the back theory or evolution, and the whole point of sacrificing Rui Patricio was for the reasons that he wasn't as comfortable with the ball at his feet versus someone like Jose Sarr. But yesterday's game just gave me a pang to get Patricio back, that you could count on the one hand the mistakes that he made in his time with us. But even with mistakes, he never gave you that oh shit moment that Sarr would do and like make a save and make up for it. But they were very, very few and far between with Rui Patricio. So I'd stick Patricio back in goal.
I think I'd use Raul. I still think in place of Huang. I think Raul, and then nobody can complain. Ooh, we don't have a number 9. There you go. There's your number 9. How about the fact that Neves and Moutinho? I don't think any of us would put them in the start. That's insane.
I do think it's funny. I mean, I feel like I've seen this debate a lot recently with like, does Ruben Neves get into this team and whatever? But it's like, it's more about like profile. You know, I think if you put him into this team, he wouldn't look as good as he did before he left because of the way that we play. You know, he wasn't that quick at turning defense into attack. We created a system where he had lots of time to pick a pass, and that's just not what we're doing anymore. And so in some ways, of the two of them, I'd rather have Moutinho because he has a bit of that, you know, terrier-like quality like Tommy Doyle does, where he's just nipping at someone's heels, and that could be useful to us. And I agree that Raul Jimenez, if we're not talking about starting 11, I think like Raul Jimenez, this almost makes me feel bad to say, but as the striker on the bench to change up our options and have someone who is decent at build up, but not quite what Cunha does, but much better right in the center of the box, that would be fun. And the ultimate fun choice, obviously, is what everybody has said, is Adama. What does Adama do in a Gary O'Neill system?
Oh my God, he would be the ultimate 60th minute weapon. Like, come back home. Come back home.
I'm with Paul. I think if you go Diogo Jota with Neto and Cunha up front, we're looking, and that would mean he's not starting for Liverpool. I would say,
right.
We're living at a time that Wolves' front three is better than Liverpool's, like, and more devastating, which is absolutely
I'd
insane
love to have
say.
Jota back, especially in the Gary system.
Yeah, I mean, with this like fluid, like positionless, almost forward line. Oh man, it'd be so good. Okay, Drew from Pittsburgh emailed hello@wholelotofwolves.com, which is our email address if you want to get us there. And he asks, as a new fan, can you clarify the lyrics to The Liquidator? And there was some debate amongst the Twitter sphere about this too, I believe, including Josh. I feel like you were involved in that, right?
I think it was mentioned on the fan cast when I was on there.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's either werewolves or the wolves. And which is it, Paul?
I'm team the Wolves. I've always said it as the Wolves, and being there and around it during the time, that was all that was said. Now, whether because it's been so long, that's kind of changed, I'm not sure, but I'm firmly in the Wolves camp.
It certainly sounds when you listen to the audio that they're saying werewolves.
Yeah, that's what I always thought, just picking it up from the audio, but I accept the correction. I did enjoy, because this is where my brain went when I found out that it's supposed to be the Wolves. And I think it was Gully from the fan cast who first picked up on this when I guess Stu did the poll, is that like if it's the Wolves, then it reads like it's a letter, like
it's a letter
writing this formal letter, you know, dear West Bromwich Albion fans, I invite you to fuck off. Signed, the Wolves.
The Wolves, yeah. And when he said that, because all the time I was like, I don't like the Wolves, I like werewolves, and when they said that, I was like, okay, I get that. Yeah, it's like a term. It's salutation.
I'm just glad I'm not the only one who was confused about it. I always thought it was werewolves, and then when we did our Black Country Derby episode, and we all signed off under Paul's direction with F off West Brom, the Wolves, I was like, wow, I've just been wrong this whole time. But what is wrong in this case anyway? If if the rest of the
Which goes to show you ask the people that have been fans the longest. Like Paul and Stu and them. They know.
Exactly. So we deferred to them in that situation. So your answer, Drew, is F off West Brom, the Wolves. Let's roll with that. That'll be the official.
Ideally on a postcard.
Yeah. That'll be the official lyrics to the Liquidator of Whole Lot of Wolves going forward, and hopefully many others. All right. Thanks everyone who wrote in with your no stupid questions. Of course, brought to you by Esfuerzo Wines, showcasing 3 generations of winemaking in every bottle. You can get 15% off of your wine order at esfuerzowines.com if you use the promo code WOLVES, as in the Wolves.
With thanks to Alex producing, Danny on the socials, and to you, the listener. We're going to be back at the start of next week to review that trip to Tottenham and then preview a visit of Sheffield United at the Molineux. So we'll continue to walk proudly this week, and to everyone we meet, we'll be saying, up the mighty Wolves.